Okay, so listening over to the previous episode, we came up with a couple of responses that we wanted to make with regards to what was said. One of the things I said was that kids are horrible, and that was such a blanket statement and exactly the kind of thing that when I see it out in the world, when those blanket statements are made, I cringe and I'm like, well, how can you possibly make such a declaration? Because there are so many different people expressing in different ways that you can't gather everyone up and say, this is what a group of people are. And I just wanted to address that and say, that's not what I really think. Though, of course, in the moment it was, right? It was a thing that I said, but in the light of reflection, I was able to say to myself, does this represent what I feel like in a calm and reflective mode? No, it doesn't. And that kind of also highlights the fact that we say things when we're in point-proving mode, which actually doesn't represent what we would think in this calm, expansive state. And so when people are put up in debate against one another on television, on a news program or something, and they're firing off at each other, is that really representative? Maybe not. And so all of this old media that we see doesn't give space. And I've been listening to podcasts for a long time now. And the thing I love about it, and the thing that has been said about podcasts, is that they give the talkers space to really go into their positions. Whereas on news programs, they've only got 30 seconds. And so how is it possible to have a coherent conversation about any of the many difficult subjects that they're discussing with such a format? Well, we can't. And so that's one of the big reasons why the world we live in today is so deranged, is because we have a completely deranged media. And podcasts, when I first started listening to them, I was so thrilled at the idea that we're moving away from old modes of media into new. But anyway, this is a whole rabbit hole. I don't want to spend too long going down that. I just wanted to amend my statement. And there was one other statement that I made as well, which I wanted to address. And that was directed at you, Jay. In the last episode, we were talking about the light and the dark, good and evil, duality. And Jay pushed back, saying, I just don't see how we're evil. And I said, what are you running away from? And again, on reflection, that was just ego trying to prove a point. That wasn't a calm, considered, sensitive thing to say.
I acknowledge that you're taking that back, and I certainly wasn't running away from anything. I'm more than happy to take on anything that's thrown at me. We shouldn't shy away from anything, and that's how we get things resolved, because we are taking them head on. But no, I appreciate what you said there, Joe. And I did speak to my monk friend about this light and dark, because I wanted a bit more understanding of it from a Buddhist point of view. So I spoke to him, and he said that we are light beings, essentially. We come here and we pick up the darkness as humans along the way, which can then be considered evil. So that is where his standpoint is in regards to that. And of course, that's within religion, which is absolutely fine. So yeah, I just wanted to come back on that. And he said he has no fear of death, which was amazing. He said he has accomplished everything he has set out to accomplish in his lifetime, and that anything now is a bonus. And I thought that was amazing.
That's what we've both said independently too. Nice.
Exactly. So that's what I said to him back. I said, this is how I feel. So we had a really nice conversation. It went on for about an hour and a half, and lots was said, but those two things, amongst a few others, were standouts on that. So the kids being evil thing, let me just tie that up as well. kids in a classroom environment can be quite horrible to each other because they have that competitive element. We spoke about this recently. They are always wanting to one-up each other, show off in front of each other. And that's an element. And perhaps that isn't the most natural way for kids to learn, because they have that drive to do ill to one another. Like, we come from tribal backgrounds where we have communities, and within communities we have adults and children mixed together. So with just children in a classroom environment, 30 of them, and expecting them to learn to the best of their ability with all this competition around them and the scoring systems, and it's like we said recently, you've got the mission of climbing the tree, and you have 10 different species, including a fish, an elephant, and a monkey. Who's going to climb the tree the best? It's going to be the monkey, because the monkey has been climbing trees its whole life. It knows what to do. This break of understanding between every individual having their own unique style of learning, and yet they're all put to this standardized expectation of achieving results. So that's just something we could probably put a pin on and come in at a later point. But children, yeah, they can be not very nice to each other. But with the right environment and right encouragement, they'd thrive.
One might argue some kids fly, right? They come out of school with the grades, they go into business, they go into jobs, high-paying jobs, and they, quote, thrive. They thrive in the system because that's what school is designed to do. It's selecting. It's a filtering system to put this person in this part of the machine, this person in that part of the machine, according to their ability. And that's worked up until now, in so much as the machine's been well oiled. But I think more and more people are waking up and going, do we actually want the machine? Do we have to live within this machine? Can we climb out and get back to something more tribal? Tribal without the connotation of warring tribes. Tribal as in closer to our native roots, closer to something that's more balanced between the feminine and masculine elements of each and everyone's psyches.
I feel like it just needs a little bit of an update. Things in society seems to have gone forward and developed, and the educational system seems to just be quite archaic. Yes, it does produce amazing results, but I'm just not quite sure if it is still best way for young people to learn. When I see what kids learn, it's pretty much the same as what I was learning. So things need to be updated, I think. And when kids are all together, like we said, kids can be mean to one another and throw horrible remarks to each other, like homophobic remarks. Kids are like, oh, that's gay. It puts gay in...
Is that still going on?
That's still going on.
Okay.
That's still going on. And it puts gay in a negative, in a negative space. And this language just gets carried out through adolescence, through adulthood. And then it becomes a hate speech. And then it's not treating everyone equal. So the problem still exists.
But it exists way less. Surely it exists way less than when we were kids at school. Compared to the experiences kids went through in the 80s, my experience through the early 2000s was comparatively really light. I mean, I flew under the radar pretty well, I think. And then going into college as well, the same again. It was around, but it's gotten better. And from my understanding, it has got better still. I have a friend who has a daughter who apparently came home at the age of 13 and said, "Mum, I'm a lesbian. I've got a girlfriend at school." And I thought that was amazing, because to feel free enough to express that way, that in my opinion, that's progress.
That is progress, and that is amazing. I grew up in a multicultural town where there was still a lot of religions at play,
right?
And within religions, it's not accepted. So you've got all these different cultures, and in this school as well, and everyone's got their own idea of how we should be living out our lives. So I probably didn't fly under the radar just as smoothly, and I saw others not fly under the radar very well. So I did see a lot of discrimination. I saw a lot of abuse. And yeah, it wasn't very nice to see. And obviously I didn't have the language or the skills or the tools to support where I could have supported. That's things we develop when we get older. But I feel like I could have gone down the route of, right, I've seen this happen. It's affected me so much. I'm going to now be part of a movement where I defend others against this prejudice and stick with that. But that's almost a never-ending battle, because in this society you will always get that, and it locks you into a certain narrative of how to tackle it. So what I've done is taken a step back and be like, no, I don't want to lock myself into that. How about we just see it for what it is and see that it doesn't serve and work on our own stuff.
So your experience was different to my experience. You experienced more discrimination and more bigotry than I did, clearly. And so, yeah, my perspective of the situation, therefore, is different. And we were going to school in towns 2.5 hours away from each other. It's not that far in the grand scheme of things. And yet we've got two very different views of the situation. So that highlights the subjective nature of all experience, and also the fact that if we were to zoom into my school, the experience I had being gay growing up in a secondary school versus this boy who was also gay, his story within the same school will be completely different. So that's something that I'm only recently learning how to navigate. I mean, it seems so obvious on the other side. Like, how can I possibly not have acknowledged and respected and recognized the subjective nature of other people's experience? Because I used to think I was quite empathetic and compassionate and considerate, but sort of as the layers of learning come in, I realize I've fallen short on that quite considerably, and that's highlighted in the recording of last episode. And I'm sure as I listen through to what I've said today and go, oh, upon reflection, that's nowhere near as considerate or kind or loving as it could have been. And so actually this is a really good journaling device.
Yes.
Us talking. So if nothing else, at least it's that. And we can learn with each other how best to communicate, how best to interact, how best to show up in the world. And so acknowledging that the subjective nature of everyone's experience, if I find myself talking with some authority on a topic that affects many other people, maybe I should just check myself.
Yes.
And be like, do I have a sufficiently broad overview of this problem? Homophobia being one, right? You say there are kids still saying, oh, that's gay. That used to really bother me when I was a kid. I'm surprised it's still going on. But if it's still going on, then it's still going on. And then I can just modify my perception of the problem. I think it's important, though, to recognize that there is subjective experience and then there's collective experience. And there's no question that the collective experience has improved overall for gay people since the 1980s.
100%. We have progressed a lot in that regard.
But it's still important to acknowledge the subjective experience of the individual who is still going through something like that.
Yes, exactly. Because everyone's having their own unique experience. So we can't say, yes, it has got better, and then poor Billy down the road has had a really tough time going through school or college or even the work environment, because depending where you are, depends if the work environment works for you too. And so racism still exists in society today, right? It still exists, and it has always existed, because we see people as different, rather than seeing the similarities that we have with one another. We have two eyes, 2 ears, a mouth, and a nose. And if we focused on the similarities, we probably wouldn't be so uptight about, oh, that person has this view. It's more difficult to try and understand the content of their character, to understand their views, to not shy away from conversation that could enlighten us in regard to what they're all about. And Morgan Freeman, he has once said that he doesn't want a Black History Month because every time you bring up race, it still becomes a thing to focus on. Why can't we just not bring up the colour of someone's skin? Why can't we not see them as human beings? Why can't we just identify someone who's walking down the road by the colour of their trainers or the colour of the top they're wearing instead of the colour of their skin?
Yeah, I agree.
And we all want to be loved. We all want to be happy. So why can't we just treat everyone how we would like to be treated ourselves?
Being Caucasian, I've not been on the receiving end of anything. I've only been able to sort of look from the outside in. Did you have experiences of receiving racism?
I did, but it was mainly through friends that would joke about it.
Okay.
So it's almost like with the whole "oh, you're gay" kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like they'd joke about it, so they'd want that it would then become an issue because even joking about it is still bringing it into play.
I agree. Yeah, I don't think we should joke about that kind of thing because even though it's just a joke, yeah, but you're perpetuating, like, why is it funny? Because it's pointing to an uncomfortable truth that there are people that think this way.
Yes.
And you're perpetuating that as an idea.
Yes.
Why not just let it die? Why not just let it be a thing of the past and not see that person as the same as you in every meaningful way?
I guess, yeah, racism is not so much of an issue perhaps today as it was before because we have equal opportunities for everyone. Companies go really out of their way to employ ethnic minorities, so then they can then perhaps just say, look, we employ people of colour as well, so there is...
But do you feel that the pendulum has swung the other way and it becomes almost like disingenuous? It's like, we have to employ a certain number of women, we have to employ a certain number of people who are not Caucasian, yes, just to fit some kind of number. Like, is that really an authentic representation of people, or is that...
It's probably not genuine. We should get people based on their skills, and not because of we haven't got a person of colour or we haven't got anyone in the Department of Finance that's an ethnic minority, so we need to employ someone so that we can then appear to be...
That's it. It's appearances, right? It feels very superficial and fake and inauthentic.
Yes, exactly. It's not genuine.
But I get the... See, I've been on both sides of this debate because it's a very heated debate, or has been. When I was paying attention to such things, it was an incredibly heated debate, and I felt very strongly one way and then very strongly the other way. And having been on both sides and now having stepped away from the whole thing, I kind of appreciate that the pendulum has to swing the other way for a little bit. And I understand people's fear of seeing that pendulum swing and going, okay, and now as a Caucasian white straight man, that became the whole sort of like, there is now discrimination against white straight men. And you don't fix discrimination of one group of people by discriminating against another.
No.
But by the same measure, if the pendulum needs to swing the other way for a little bit, just for people to realize, we've collectively landed in another extreme. This isn't ideal either. Let's try and find our way into the middle. The route into the middle is a difficult route. We're having to carve new frontiers for the collective consciousness in the course of figuring this problem out. So what I saw was a tremendous amount of dis-ease and fear with where we were at with this whole thing, and it's like, it's almost apocalyptic. But that's cool, because apocalypse isn't the end of the world. Apocalypse is a great reveal, and so it is apocalyptic in a way. The old ways are dying, and it's very messy. Or a better way of saying it would be, there is a new system being birthed, and birth is very messy.
Yes. I think if we just take on Love Thy Neighbour, then we would be going exactly where we want to be going.
So don't fight the battle.
So don't fight the battle.
Exactly. There's not a battle.
Yeah.
Don't even treat it as a battle. It's a birthing process, and just be there for each other while the collective consciousness, at which is the mother, is screaming and in pain and desperate for this thing to come out. That's what we're going through. We are outside and inside that metaphor.
Yeah, we shouldn't go for the battle, because that just perpetuates it. It's like keeping certain days and certain weeks and certain months, and they applying them to certain people. And okay, doesn't that keep things going? It's like we celebrate the end of a war, say, 50 years ago, 60 years ago, 70 years, it's constantly being brought up as something we should be celebrating, the end of a war. But yet it still keeps it within the psyche, human psyche. Okay,
Yeah.
War,
Yeah.
war this, war that. It's constant, and that's within computer games as well. With computer games, they're always talking about war. Is that something we want to perpetuate? Consciousness is definitely rising to the point where we don't need that in the new world. We need something to focus on in regards to light and love.
You mentioned computer games there, like the nature of computer games and the competitive nature of computer games, and it becoming an esport. Can you expand on all of that?
Yeah, well, computer games, they're still creating computer games that are essentially violent, celebrating war, celebrating competitiveness, one-upmanship on someone else. It's the driving factor of how you then go through the levels of games. How harsh can you be, especially in games like Grand Theft Auto, right, where it is all violence.
Yeah, we were talking about that the other day, weren't we? About how we
Yes.
both used to play GTA and
Yes.
actually got enjoyment about hopping in a car and mowing pedestrians down, seeing how many, and being disappointed that this street only has 5 people.
Yeah, and yeah, exactly. And how many stars can we get?
Yeah.
How bad can we be to members of the public, to people, and how long can we survive? What weapons do we need to have in our backpack, in our arsenal? What weapons can we use to kill everyone? Efficiently. And it's computer games like that just perpetuate the same behaviors. I remember playing a game called Rhyme on my computer, and I never came across a game like it before. It was so innocent, so pure. There was no violence in it. It was just a nice adventure game where you'd have to try and remember who you are, essentially, and remember what happened to you. So it was beautiful, and it wasn't a very long game. And I thought to myself, wow, this game is what should be going through society, is what people should be queuing up early in the morning for the shop to open, for people to then buy it. Because I think if we had more computer games like this, the mindset would then change. It's the mindset that we have today that I think isn't really driving human progress. It keeps things how they have been for so many years, and that's computer games, that's general conversations, that's how we interact with one another. We don't need to be reminded of all the negative things that are happening in the world. Why can't we be reminded of all the good? So yeah, games like Rhyme. In fact, I don't play computer games anymore. I play app games on my phone to kill time, and I'm not saying everyone should stop playing computer games. Computer games were so much fun. Is there a way you stand with computer games, Joe?
The whole app games for killing time, I don't like those at all.
Yeah, no, I hear what you're saying. I guess what I mean by that is if I'm, say, waiting for a train and I've got 3 minutes to wait, I'm going to jump on my phone and play a game for 3 minutes. I guess that's kind of what I mean. Yeah, I could sit there in a train station and meditate, but I don't always choose to do that. I choose to then play an app game. and entertain myself like that. So it's almost like killing time where it's time that I don't see beneficial to be using.
And that, okay, I want to try and approach this in a very non-confrontational way. I'm not saying that I'm casting a judgment on you for doing that or what have you, but my personal relationship with that, having done that in the past, where I'm at with that at the moment, I'm like, every moment is an opportunity to experience, to connect. So if I've got 3 minutes and I'm waiting for a train, I want to be present in that moment. I don't want to go on my phone and be sucked into some time killer. I want to use every moment, because I have one life, right? I want to be able to look at the world with that childlike glee of look at the shape of that concrete slab and be amazed by that. I want to be more interested in the grass pushing its way out between paving stones in the street than playing some Candy Crush game where it's all like bright colours and just getting these dopamine fixes, because these games are designed in the same way that TikTok is designed. They're the same poison. They're the same poison for the mind to create a decreased state of connection to humanity. When I'm waiting for a train and I've got 3 minutes, why can't I talk to the person on the bench next to me? Oh, well, that person doesn't want to talk because they are stuck in that world. And I know I saw this brilliant meme of all of these young people sat at their grandmother's house, all playing on their phone, and the grandmother was looking really depressed. And I'm like, okay, that makes a point. But then it was balanced by a picture of, from like the 1920s or something, of all of these men on the subway, and they all had their nose in a newspaper.
Yes.
So it's not like it's a new problem. But that old way in the 1920s, my perspective is that that's wrong also. Or at least not wrong. It's right for them. If they want to do it, that's where they're at. That's cool. But for me, I want to connect to that part. When I'm sat on the subway, I want to be talking to people. I want to why can't there be this constant communication? Well, because we're all in our own little worlds.
So do you speak to everyone at the train station when you're there?
No, because that's not the culture, and I'm not confident enough yet to just start up. I'm better than I used to be, because I used to live in this tiny bubble of fear, and by degrees I'm coming out of that tiny little bubble. And, I'll talk to the taxi driver now. Before, I would just hide away in the back of a taxi if I was getting an Uber or something. Now I'll ask a question. If they're up for a conversation, amazing. If they're not, then I'm not going to push it. But that's where I'm at.
I guess I've travelled a lot recently. I've got into a lot of taxis, on a lot of airplanes, and on a lot of trains. And when you're traveling, you get tired, right? So, you're tired. You don't always feel like you can have that upbeat conversation with the person next to you.
Yeah, no, of course. And nor do I. I'm not saying I do.
No.
I'm just saying that, generally speaking, that's where I want to be, as opposed to killing time on TikTok or something.
Yes.
Yeah.
And if I'm feeling tired, I'm just going to jump on my phone, and whether that's an app game, whether that's organising who I'm seeing next week, it's still on your phone, it's still on the screen, it's still doing something. But yeah, we don't always have the energy to then do the most optimal human interaction.
But I'm not saying it's human. Maybe human interaction is the optimal. But yeah, likewise, I don't always have the energy for that. So, but then I just want to be looking at the world, because I find the world to be more interesting than anything that could be like flashing on my phone.
Yes.
Seeing a spider or something in the corner of the bus shelter or something, that's what I want to see. I don't want to be drip fed from this technological entity that I don't think is helping us as a society, and therefore I just choose not to engage with it. Anyone who wants to engage with it, that's completely up to them, and I have no judgment on them deciding that. Certainly in the past, how this whole sort of transition for me began was I would look at that person and be like, oh, I'm better than you because I don't do that. It's very hard to get away from ego in that regard, but what I'm on a quest to do is to tune into that, into those judgments, and be like, is that serving? Is that coming from higher self? And it's always no on both accounts. And therefore, can I train myself? It's a practice. It's a practice. Can I practice not judging? Can I practice not being concerned about that sort of thing and just do me, right? I'm just doing me, trying to find out what serves me best. And why am I here on a podcast talking about it? Is it because somewhere my ego is like, and I want to convert everyone to my way of thinking? On a certain level, that's where it is. But does that serve? Is that coming from higher self? Again, no on both accounts. So I am consciously, for now, because I'll slip into unconsciousness at another point, I'm consciously pointing to that and saying, no, this is, I choose to let that go. And again, it's a practice because I'm a work in progress.
As we all are.
And I'm trying to identify what doesn't serve. And ego in the way that it comes on is
Wanting to be right.
Hmm.
I mean, I played 8 hours of computer games for months and years, actually, on end.
Me too.
8 hours.
Me
So
too.
what I've done for me is I've reduced that amount of time into 3 minutes here and 3 minutes there as my fix to get through. It's actually a huge amount of progress for me as in my journey, because I don't want to be spending all my time on a computer game. I want to be doing more productive things and getting on with things, and I find myself doing that much more. So I guess that's what I mean. It's not spending my life on a screen. I've reduced it to 3 minutes here, 3 minutes there on a screen.
That's awesome. And likewise, I've been on a similar journey with that. I used to play crazy amounts of, I used to play World of Warcraft. I spent basically the equivalent of about 200 days.
Yes, yeah.
Because you could type in like /played. And so I played about 200 days of my life just on that game, let alone all the other games I've played and been addicted to.
Yes. And yeah, and same with me. I remember getting the Zelda game on the Nintendo Switch and played hundreds of hours on that, and it was great. It was really good. It really served me. It really entertained me. It was right for where I was in that moment in time. But now I feel like it doesn't really serve me. You know, that energy can be put on other things, on other projects, and other, like this podcast, right? And that's, I guess, how we grow. We change all the time, and we should all embrace change and not let our ego stop us from that change, because our ego can be like, oh, well, no, I don't want to change. I'm quite happy where I am. Why would I need to change? We shouldn't drive with our ego. We shouldn't respond with our ego. We should check in with it, because, like I said, we can't get rid of our ego. We can tame it, befriend it, because our ego teaches us so much about ourselves, about our patterns.
Like my whole response process through you playing video games and me saying, no, I don't play video, like it's really interesting to hear back that process real time, rather than, because I know when it comes to listening back to this podcast again and experiencing, seeing me in the past and going, oh, in hindsight, I can see the ego. I can see ego expressing. And it's not, I don't think we can get rid of that entirely, but we can at least
be aware of it. Being aware of the ego is huge. You know, it's huge being aware of the ego. So being aware of it and then choosing whether we can work on that. If we choose to work on it, if we don't see it being needed to be worked on, then we don't work on it. As long as we're not harming anyone, there's no issue with that. And that's kind of what spirituality is about as well. It's about not letting our ego get the best of us. So being spiritual is all about seeking out your own experiences and trying to get an understanding of what right and wrong is, rather than being told of what right and wrong is. So that say, I guess, religion is when you are learning from the experiences of other through texts and teachings of others. It's more of perhaps a following mindset. And where we have got in the world today, I think, has been mainly through a following mindset rather than being in our own power and becoming individual leaders in our understanding of what is acceptable and what we should and should not be doing to others, and how we are negatively affecting the environment like we are. Leaders have had their time. What leader has actually got us to the point where we are thriving in an environment? Well, we are still not thriving. The environment is still a little bit messed up. Our behaviours towards one another is a little bit messed up. The economy, I guess, is a little bit messed up. So we have never actually perhaps had a successful leader. So perhaps the time for leaders has come in that sense. But
yeah, we've tried the model.
Yeah, we've tried the model.
And it's failed repeatedly.
Yeah, you're right. And it's failed. Yeah. So in that sense, we don't need leaders like that to all then bow down or follow one person who will lead us out of darkness and into the light. Perhaps that is no longer a idea to attach to. So if that isn't it, then that means the followers that's gone as well, because that's the opposite. You got the leader and then the follower.
So it's depolarized.
It's depolarized, yes. So what is the alternative to that? What replaces that? Is it just being? Is it just we've learned that is not the way and now we just...
The only way that model would work is if everyone agreed not to take the power themselves, right? Yes. Because nature abhors a vacuum. So if you take one leader away, then while there's that leader-follower mentality, then there will be another leader installed, and that leader that will install themselves will likely be the one who has fought most brutally to get to the top, and therefore is going to rule most brutally and selfishly.
Yes, because our society is almost set up to generate leaders, right?
Yeah. We all cluster around individuals. We call them stars. We navigate by them. And Hollywood has created a star system of... The word I was going to use was repugnant, but that's just a judgment.
Yes, that would be a judgment. But you could still point out what is obvious and what you see, but not judge it, right?
Yeah, true. The stars that we follow, the politicians and the celebrities, it seems like they're leading us off a cliff. And rather than being lemmings and blindly following, maybe we interrogate that new model that doesn't have that polarized leader-follower structure. What am I talking about here? Is it anarchy? We've tried anarchy. Does it work? No. Well, why doesn't it work? Is it because the people that engage in anarchy generally have been people who haven't embraced this new surge? And how could they? Because it seems like this new way of thinking has only really emerged in the last, well, I was going to say few years, but is it few months? Is this new consciousness, this rising consciousness in the now? So anything that's been tried in the past is not worth trying again. Shall we try something new? So it's not anarchy. We love boxes and labels, and by putting them in, we restrict it. So it's anarchy in a sense, in so much as by the definition of having no central leader, and we all lead ourselves. Yeah, it's that. But then anarchy has connotations. Anarchy, like class war and all of that stuff. So really, what's being birthed is brand new. What that looks like, I don't know. I don't think any individual does know. But what's happening is that we're all, those of us who are talking about these things, and I see it everywhere online, and yeah, maybe I'm getting an echo chamber, but it's exciting to see that I'm not the only one having these thoughts, that out there in the world, there is a recognition that consciousness is rising, and that we are moving into a more spiritual age where we understand it not through the lens of religion and dogma, but through what was brought about by the Theosophical Society that brought in this idea that all of these different practices can be taken from all of these different schools of thought and applied and realize that it's all pointing to the same thing. So what all religion is trying to do is describe in words that which can't be described in words. God. It's ineffable, right? So we can't describe it. And there are layers upon layers below that which we can talk about. And I think it was Jordan Peterson who said, and he was probably referring to something Joseph Campbell said, the idea that these myths are accessing this indescribable realm, this realm that goes beyond the power of language. And so these nebulous ideas, that was Jordan Peterson's words, these nebulous ideas that are above us, we net them down with myth and metaphor so that we can bring them to our human level and kind of try to understand them. And for me, that's what spirituality is. It's not that I'm accessing directly source, but I am looking above my current level and going, what lessons can come down from this space? And for me, I like to frame them through the lens of myth because, I don't know, it just works for me. And it's not going to work for everyone. Some people are much more sort of scientific and logical, and they need empirical data in order to believe something. Seeing is believing. I have been playing with believing is seeing for a while now, and have, I believe, seen a way of showing up in the world that is not perfect. We started the podcast, and all throughout we've been pointing back to all of the things that, upon reflection, I'll be like, oh, that's not living up to my highest self. What even is my highest self? Well, I don't know, but I'm learning. I'm in that process, and this is what spirituality is for me, is learning what that higher self is, asking that question, who am I? On a certain level, I'm Joe, but then also, what is Joe as a consciousness that's plugged in? And I realize I'm sort of jumping all over the place, but that's the problem with these ideas, is that, see, what I'm trying to do is reach up into that nebulous realm and talk about that which I can't really talk about. I don't have the language to talk about it. So I turn it into myth, I turn it into story. I mean, I guess at the end of the day, the only way of accessing it is to stop talking and go within and just meditate. That's what I get out of meditation, is that peace and that connection. But then there is also a desire to exist on this level also, and interact and talk and play and do all of those wonderfully human things. And I'm really, really grateful to be experiencing that. And yeah, I've kind of lost the question, what the question was, if there even was one, or if I've just been rambling for an hour. I don't know.
Well, you mentioned who am I as the question, and that is one of the main questions to spirituality, like, who am I, right? And I feel like I've got closer to answering that question, but at the same time, we can never really know exactly who we are because we are constantly learning. And with spirituality comes the understanding that we live many lives through reincarnation. So who am I? Who am I right now is exactly the same as who you are. Not better than or less than, but a different expression of the same consciousness. So spirituality is all about that introspection and finding out who you are. And then comes the other big question, what is the purpose? What is the meaning of life? Who knows? That's on an individual basis. That's something we need to try and work out. And some people feel like they have the answer to that. My monk friend, he said that when he was 14, he realised what he needed to do in life. And he had the meaning of life to him at 14, and that hasn't changed since then. And he's well into his adult years. So that's where I stand with who am I? And the purpose of my life, who knows? That's to be seen. That is a constant evolving aspect of myself. And that's one question, or these are the questions that don't get brought up on mainstream media. And these are the discussions that there is no time to talk about all this in a 60-minute program for everyone to then tune in at 6 o'clock to then watch, or however long the mainstream news is these days. But I think we started off with how society is set up, and society is set up so that we have leaders, and we have spoken about communities before, and we did speak about us being individual, sovereign, perhaps leaders going throughout life, doing what serves us as long as it doesn't harm others. But perhaps within small communities we don't then need leaders per se. We need probably one leader of the group, but that means many leaders because of the community. Or we would just have like a almost council, a number of people making decisions, almost like a voting kind of system. But these are all labels, like you said. We put labels to all these things, and labels give us an understanding of what we're trying to convey, but then we attach to the label. And I think when we attach to a label, it then becomes more of an issue. And
well, labels have connotations. So I mentioned anarchy earlier. Anarchy has connotations of violence, but implicit in the definition isn't violence. It's just that became a movement, and therefore that label has that attached to it.
Yes, exactly. And that doesn't necessarily mean that that way of living means that we have to be violent towards one another, right?
No, exactly. And likewise, you mentioned councils and leaders. Like leadership has certain connotations.
Exactly.
Councils has connotations. So if we can strip back definitions.
Yeah, exactly. Because, and sometimes that's where we almost disagree, or we have that lack of understanding, is because I'm defining something differently to how you're defining something.
Exactly. Language is hopelessly imprecise.
Exactly. And then when we actually get down to it and have the discussion, we're talking about the same thing. We're agreeing on the same thing. And we generally do, but we just have this definition discrepancy that we constantly are fighting over. And that's the world as well. But when we say fighting, because whatever resists persists, but we constantly can't meet in the middle about, and that's the world, because we don't meet in the middle with things in the world, and we end up fighting and saying, no, things should be done this way, things should be done that way. There's still wars. We're far from civilized. We're wanting a better world, and the only way to get there is to talk about it, which is what we're doing here on this podcast. How can we make the world a better place? Identifying the problems, not attaching to perhaps resolving the problems, because we've been trying to do that for, I guess, eons, and it hasn't worked. So I think it's more of taking a step back, realizing that these problems probably are just there because we're perpetuating them by talking about it.
Because we're within them. We're not stepping out.
Yes.
We like the problem of deforestation is a deep rabbit hole. The problem of the oceans is a deep rabbit hole. And people are sort of like deep down in there thinking that the solution is down in that problem. But really maybe it is. And those people that are doing that and trying to solve it that way, amazing. And I'm so grateful for that work that's being done. For me, I want to pull right back out to the surface, back up into that realm of myth and those nebulous ideas, and see if there's a way of just resolving those problems just by simply moving past them. Because the person that hops in a digger or starts up that chainsaw in the Amazon rainforest and is doing the deed, the deforestation, that person isn't awake to the idea that what they're doing is bad. Or at least they might have some awareness that it's not ideal, but he's got to put food on the table.
Exactly, yeah.
So the way to solve that isn't to go in and argue with that man and say you mustn't do that, because he's not gonna agree with you.
Exactly, it's not the source of the problem.
Nor is it going to the person who owns the deforestation company and saying you shouldn't be doing this, because he also isn't going to agree with you.
Exactly, they're not the source of the problem.
The only way that gets changed is for that person to have their own awakening. And you literally cannot, as much as you might want to, go up to that person and say, look, here's the door, walk through it. Because not only are they not going to see the door, they're going to think you're fucking crazy. So you can't reach that world. You simply have to organize away from it something new that's better, that in the fullness of time, that person over there will go, oh, well, look at how that life is going. That seems to me to be better. But of course, that person who owns that deforestation company is probably some multi-millionaire who has his own private island and has all of these material things and is convinced very, very deeply that this is his best life. And he'll be surrounded by people who also believe that. So the whole problem is so massive that there's actually, yes, we can identify problems. And we can ask the question, how do we make the world a better place? We absolutely should be doing that. But the idea that we can come up with a solution is, within that world, we're going to quite quickly come up to the realization that, oh, it's not possible. Okay, so then what do we do? Okay, well then let's just let's discuss what is ideal for us as individuals who do speak this way. And there's lots of us, there's lots of people who are thinking in this new way, who have been in that old world and then woken up and gone, oh, actually, that's the insanity over there. Over here, see, while I was an atheist and while I was within that philosophical material realm, I would have looked over to the person who I am today and gone, well, you're crazy and you're ridiculous. But now that I'm on the other side of this, I look back to that state of being and go, you are crazy. And it goes back to what we were talking about with the video games and like Grand Theft Auto, right? Like the idea that I was getting a minigun and spraying people down on the streets and trying to kill as many police as possible and blow up as many helicopters. Like the idea that that's normal, to me on the other side of all of this, I'm like, okay, well, and it's not that I now think I'm right now. It goes back to that whole thing of like, the more I learn, the more I realize I don't know. And so wherever I'm at the moment, I trust that in 5 years' time, I will be able to look back to now and go, oh, well, I didn't know what I was talking about. Even though right now, what I'm saying to me seems more logical and more compassionate and more closer to the truth than I was 5 years ago. So 5 years ahead from now, the same again. So it's always going to be that process of like getting closer back to who I really am, I hope. But in terms of addressing the problems in the world, I'm not sure we will make much headway if we fight. We need to move away from fighting against people and just go, okay, look, if you want to deforest. If you want to eat meat and kill animals and farm and do all of that, you do that. I'm going to try something else. And if in the course of my lifetime I don't change the world, that's cool. I'm not looking to change the world. I'm just looking to change how I show up in the world. And if we all do that, then that would change the world. It's kind of funny that way. Like, in order to change the world, you can't want to change the world. And this goes back to the whole ego thing that I was talking about earlier, is like, is deep down with doing this podcast, am I secretly trying to like do something? And am I secretly trying to like become something? Do I really want to be famous? Do I want to be a celebrity? Do I want to be a guiding star? Do I want to be a teacher? All of these things that I've been conditioned by society to want. But is it actually being conditioned by society? Or is that just something that's fundamental in me? Is that just my human nature? Maybe. But then can I become aware of it and then go, actually, no, I don't really want to play that game? Like I said earlier, this is a journaling device, right? It just so happens that it's a journaling device that we're going to share with people, because if it happens to resonate with someone and they go, oh, I kind of like the cut of your jib, you're kind of speaking to what I'm exploring also, and says, I see what you're doing or what you're trying to do. Have you thought about this? Because I can see this thing that you can't see. So maybe if you tried this and looked at it this way, maybe you'd, and then I could be like, oh, wow, okay, so I'll take that on and I'll try it on like a jumper. I went to a festival called All About Love last year. Sadly, it's not running this year, but the music artist Parangi was there, and he did this wonderful thing on the Sunday morning where he gathered us all in and we did various singing exercises, and then he spoke about his philosophy. And he said, don't believe anything I've said, just try it on like a jumper or sweatshirt up. He's American, so he wouldn't have used jumper. But try it on for a while. And if it fits, then you can keep it. But if it doesn't fit, take it off. And so with all of this stuff, everything I learn and everything I say is, I'm just trying these things on. Does it fit? Yes. If not, I'll take it off again.
Yeah, and that's experience as well. That's part of the spiritual journey. You try things on and you test it out and you give it a go, right?
Yeah, for sure. And this is an experiment with ego and seeing, what do I really want from this? Why am I wanting to sit down and record? Is it because I want to change the world? Well, on a certain level, of course I want to change the world, because I look out into the world and go, look at the mess. We're on a knife edge as a species. And is it a bad thing to want to change the world? Well, no, it's not. But it's how we go about it. And so what I see as people come out and try to change the world, we just circle round and round and round again. And I just want to put my 2 cents in and test and see if more wisdom can come from a YouTube commenter saying, I see you, I see where you're at in your journey, and this is what you're missing. Though, of course, people who are on the journey aren't going to tell you that you're missing something. But I mean, I guess what I'm saying then is, if there is something that I'm missing, then please do point it out, and I'll try to run it through my own sort of process and reflection process.
Yeah, everyone's got a piece of the pie, right? And so everyone's got something they can share to actually make the world a better place or make themselves better.
Yeah. And
we should, embrace that. We should embrace the knowledge and the feedback that we get from others. And I mean, for me, I'd like to leave the world better than I entered it. And if I can do that, then I will do that. We all have something to give and share, and we all have an impact on this world, whether it's micro or macro. We all still have this impact, and I like the idea of having this podcast as a journaling device. I think it's great, and actually takes a lot of the pressure off, right? We're just talking, and there's no real aim, really. We're just having a discussion of how we can make the world better, and whether we get somewhere, whether we don't, it's just fun, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah, absolutely.
And yeah, I want to hear feedback from others. And when you mentioned that, what's that saying? Someone that knows does not say.
He who knows does not speak.
That's right. He who knows does not speak. Then perhaps we wouldn't get a really wise guru say anything, because they're like, they're still getting there. They're still on their journey. So they'll probably get there eventually. And that's probably what it is. It's just letting things flow instead of intervening and saying, no, do it like this. No, do it like that.
Yeah.
But so that is probably the wisdom. And perhaps we'll probably get to that point where we don't even need to talk about anything. This podcast will be null and void.
We'll just hit record and meditate for 2 hours.
Exactly.
And then upload that.
Yeah.
Silence.
And that would be the podcast. Yeah. It wouldn't get many views, but you know what? We'd be there. So, yeah. And that would be a message in itself. But yeah, perhaps we do need a new system to get going. We don't know what that system would be, of course. We all need to awaken and come to, I think, the realization that, we want a better world. We want to change ourselves. We want to come out.
We did come out.
Yeah, we actually did come out of this podcast, yeah. Yeah, exactly. Great journaling device. So, we're just saying what feels right. Okay, so we have thought our way out of problems in the past, I think historically, where we've been in mind, and now I think it's good to come to the heart and feel out what is right to do, and come from that heart place where the good stuff is really. It's good to combine both mind with heart, and that's how thought, feeling, is how we manifest, is how we make decisions as well, not just to come from mind, but does this feel right? And I think that's a great way of going forward and making our interactions better with one another, strong, deeper connections. So it's not about using one tool set, it's using as many tool sets as we can, I feel.
Amen.
And I used to go on animal rights marches and protests, and I did that for a while, and it was fulfilling in the sense that I felt like I was playing a good role in making my stamp in what my beliefs were, and it was serving to me at the time. But I feel that activism seems to be a platform for people to vent their anger and their frustration. It probably is a form of even therapy, and not all activists use that as a platform to vent their frustrations, but everyone is playing their role. I feel like we need people in these different areas to a degree to have their say and put their point across. If we all just focused on one aspect, then all the other aspects wouldn't get looked at and wouldn't get addressed. So we all need to appreciate where people are coming from in regards to what issue they are tackling. And I guess even over time, all of us change and go to different directions. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that everyone has their place in the world, and everyone's doing what they feel is right, and they are doing what is right. They are exactly where they need to be, and they will go down the path they need to go down. And we shouldn't take anyone off their path and say, no, you shouldn't do that, you shouldn't do this, you should do what I'm doing because what I'm doing is right. No, that's ego again. Everyone needs to do what they feel is right for them to do. So that's how we probably get to a world that's better. Because if we're coming from feeling, then that's heart. And let's go with that, I'd say.
Definitely. And it's a process, and it's okay that it's a process.
Yes. Yeah. We don't have to be at the destination now. Life is a journey, and let's just enjoy the journey. If we're in this dance of life, let's not try and get to the end position of the dance move, Let's just enjoy the journey.
Yeah. Well, we could go on for hours, but maybe we're winding down now, and we'll return next week for some more explorations of what this is all about.
Yeah, this is all exciting because we don't always have something specific to say. We just have a little chat, and sometimes it ends up being a long chat, and this is good. And let the conversations flow.
Yeah, and we've got some interviews as well that we're in the process of doing and editing. So this podcast, I think, is going to be a mixture of you and IJ talking about whatever feels right to be talking about at any given moment, and then also talking to people out in the wide world who are going to be at different stages in their journey and their connection. Everyone that we've spoken to so far kind of is talking the same language as us, but it would be interesting, I would think, to talk to someone who doesn't speak the same language and see where they're at, because as you said, everyone's got different pieces of the puzzle, and it's important, at least it feels like it's important, to not, as we move into what we're moving into, it feels important not to be like, oh well, this person doesn't speak my language, therefore I'm not going to speak to them.
Exactly.
Because then that is just an old way of like, oh, you've got a different coloured skin to me, so I don't like you.
Yeah.
And in the same way, so that person who's in charge of deforesting the Amazon, absolutely still talk to them.
Yeah, everyone matters.
Exactly, because they do have a piece of the puzzle. Maybe their piece of the puzzle is exploring the rampant destruction of critical life for a certain period of time, and karma is something we can talk about at a later date, because maybe there's individual karma there, but there's also collective karma. Are we experiencing that as a like we can rail against it, but are we experiencing it because as a collective species we've got some karma to work out? Maybe, I don't know really how that works, but as a maybe,
Yes,
it might be worth thinking about.
Yeah, I'm still exploring karma and exactly what that means. I'm not 100% sure exactly what that means, but everyone does matter. Everyone does have a voice, and that person that is chopping down the trees, he could probably bring an aspect to light that we don't know about. We don't know unless we have these conversations with these people. So we are up for talking to everyone and anyone who is willing to talk to us. So there is no restriction on who cannot say something on this podcast and any other podcast. Everyone has freedom of speech. Everyone has a right to say what they want to say, as long as they're not harming anyone and inciting violence. So, yeah, everyone has a voice. Everyone has something to share. Everyone has a piece to the puzzle. And that's what this podcast is about. So, yeah, thank you everyone for listening. And we will be back soon.
See you next time.